Could Superman beat Homelander? With The Boys dropping its penultimate season finale this week, I thought now would be a good time to revisit one of the great fan debates that stirs up every time a new season of The Boys or Invincible drops. Could Superman beat Homelander? What about Omni-Man? Superman has been the gold standard of superheroes since he was first created in 1938. At the time of his introduction, he didn't have the full suite of powers he'd later be known for. He couldn't even fly until the second episode of his radio serial back in 1940. And he was originally a bit rough around the edges, but it wasn't long until he evolved into the Big Blue Boyscout we all know and love. This combination of elements, Superman's iconic status, his classic power set, and perceived corniness made him the perfect target for parody and deconstruction as comic book storytelling took a darker and edgier turn in the 80s and 90s. There is no shortage of dark Superman. There's the in-canon ones that Superman himself has fought, like Ultraman, Bizarro, and Zod. There's also the aforementioned Homelander and Omni-Man. Then you have Apollo, Marvel's Hyperion and the Sentry, the Plutonian Miracle Man, who's more of a dark Captain Marvel, but considering the Captain himself is a Superman ripoff, he counts. Ditto for Dr. Manhattan being a Captain Atom pastiche, James Gunn's own Brightburn, and then there's even Frank Miller's portrayal of the Man of Steel himself in the Dark Knight Returns series. That's just to name a few. The point is, if you're making a dark and gritty superhero comic anytime between 1980 and now, you're almost obligated to include your own grim take on Superman. And in this age where anything wearing a cape and tights has a shot at superstardom, that includes the dark Supermen themselves. Arguably, the two most successful being Homelander and Omni-Man, thanks to their hit shows. So when it's press circuit time, the creators behind those characters and the actors that portray them are inevitably asked who would win in a fight with Superman. And of course, they proclaim their character would come out on top. Like Proud Papas declaring their kid could beat up your kid, or wait. Anyway, of course Robert Kirkman says Omni-Man would beat Superman. Omni-Man is his bloody mustachioed baby. Of course Antony Starr thinks Homelander could defeat Superman. He plays the guy. Nobody be like, oh yeah, I'd totally lose that fight. And I can hear the arguments online agreeing with them. Superman's too nice. Omni-Man wouldn't pull his punches. Homelander would fight dirty. But none of that matters. In any of these fights, Superman would win. There's a few reasons for this. One is more practical. While Homelander and Omni-Man are two of the most powerful characters in their respective universes, that doesn't mean they match Superman's power level. Sure, Homelander can fly faster than a speeding bullet, and he's basically invulnerable to the degree that he doesn't even have a kryptonite-style weakness. But his greatest adversary is also a powerless limey with a crowbar. Superheroes in the Boys universe battle their egos more than any actual superpowered foe. Homelander hasn't had to face the likes of Brainiac or Zod, let alone anyone like Doomsday or Darkseid. And if he had to, he'd probably shit himself like he did when he was forced to face off with a superpowered Butcher and Soldier Boy. That's a great episode. Superman has had to fight all of those, plus evil versions of himself before. This wouldn't even be his first rodeo with an evil analog, not by a long shot, and he always comes out on top. The Boys universe, at least in the show, is an intentionally more grounded superhero universe, which means Homelander doesn't even really stand a chance against Superman, who's had to go toe-to-toe with a whole rogues gallery of mad scientists, evil gods, and multi-dimensional imps. They're just operating on different levels, intentionally so. This is a common problem with any character from Universe A fights character from Universe B battle. Not every superhero universe is created equal. When I was a kid, my mind was blown by the mega event DC versus Marvel. It was every little comic nerd's dream to see the biggest heroes from the big two publishers face off. But there's one major issue with that matchup. While Marvel has historically been more popular, DC's characters are way more powerful. Marvel found its success in part by trying to depict a superhero universe as if it was the world outside your window. In contrast to DC, which by the Silver Age had a cast of characters that could rival any pantheon of myth. So while Thor may be an actual god, to believably pal around with the likes of Captain America and Iron Man, his power level has to be kept in check so he's not flying circles around the rest of the Avengers. Meanwhile, Batman may be a mere mortal, but every month he's going on adventures with guys that can punch planets out of the sky or run so fast they go back in time. So he has to become not only the world's greatest detective, but the pinnacle of human achievement. The outcomes of half the battles in Marvel vs. DC were voted on by fans, which led to some wild outcomes like Storm beating Wonder Woman. I love Storm. She's a fantastic and groundbreaking character. There is no way she's winning a fight with Wonder Woman. This isn't to say which of those characters is better or to say one approach is better than the other. It's to say that by and large, these universes are trying to tell different types of stories, and those stories require characters to operate at different power levels. Superhero fiction is all about power fantasies, so it can be easy to forget that stronger doesn't mean better. By no measure is Spider-Man stronger than Superman. In fact, Spider-Man is often weaker than his opponents, which is part of what makes him so compelling. He has to use his ingenuity and intelligence to come out on top. On the other hand, writers constantly struggle to come up with compelling threats for Superman to face because the character is depicted as being so powerful. All that to say, Homelander doesn't stand a chance. But what about Omni-Man? The Invincible universe shares a lot of similarities with the DC universe, including a whole host of other superpowered people, and even a whole intergalactic race with the same powers as Omni-Man, some of them even more powerful than him. Omni-Man not only has the power set to match Superman, but the experience to back it up. Could Superman defeat him? I think the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, like I mentioned before, Superman has been known to move entire planets when the story calls for it. And this is where we get into the other half of my argument that is much more meta. Remember that these characters are fictional. Their true power doesn't come from physical acts, which in reality are non-existent. It comes from what they represent narratively. I mentioned earlier how part of Spider-Man's appeal is that he's often outmatched by his opponents, which requires more of him both intellectually and emotionally to overcome them. That's also a reason why we love to make Superman a bad guy. He's so powerful, he makes for a compelling antagonist. How could you possibly stop someone that powerful if they go rogue? How do you stop a god? It immediately makes whoever our protagonist is, even a trench coat wearing sociopath, more relatable. So even if Robert Kirkman wrote a story where Omni-Man is clearly stronger than Superman and beats him to a bloody pulp, which he could, there's nothing stopping him but various rights issues, it wouldn't mean anything. There's a reason Invincible didn't end with Omni-Man defeating the title character. Omni-Man being more powerful than Superman just makes Omni-Man a more meaningful antagonist to overcome. Besides, even though writers may struggle to come up with ways to challenge Superman physically, fans don't keep coming back to Superman because of his powers. They come back to Superman and most superheroes because they represent the human capacity for good and the belief, or at least the hope, that that goodness can overcome any obstacle. To quote one of my favorite authors, Grant Morrison writes in their book, Super Gods, about their youthful fear of the atomic bomb. Before it was a bomb, the bomb was an idea. Superman, however, was a faster, stronger, better idea. In Superman and his fellow superheroes, modern human beings had brought into being ideas that were invulnerable to all harm, immune to deconstruction, built to outsmart diabolical masterminds, made to confront pure evil, and somehow, against the odds, to always win. Are Homelander and Omni-Man stronger than Superman? Maybe. Again, in these fictional two-dimensional realities, the only limit is the imagination of the writers and the artists that create them. But they're definitely not stronger ideas. I mean, without Superman, they wouldn't even exist. All right, that's my argument as to why Superman easily beats both Homelander and Omni-Man. Let me know in the comments down below who you think could believably face off with Superman. I think there's an argument to be made that he wouldn't do so hot against Dr. Manhattan. Dude can atomize people. But he is limited by his own causality, so. Like, subscribe, share, all that jazz, you know the deal. And be sure to check out the first episode of my one-on-one discussion show, Trash Talk, with my first guest, Sal from Comic Pop. We had an amazing discussion. Also, check out my comic book that is on Kickstarter right now. Go to hellbentcomicbook.com. We've already funded. We're working towards our first stretch goal, which is going to add even more pages to this graphic novel. Be sure to check that out if you haven't already, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.